Welcome everyone to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle. This is our last for 2021, where we're taking up the idea of planting seeds for the future. Seeds can come in a lot of different formats, and the format that we're talking about for today is planting seed ideas. This is going to be a presentation essentially from the Bodhisattva tradition. That Bodhisattva tradition includes beings like Kuan Yin, who have that great pledge, never shall I seek nor receive private individual salvation, never shall I enter final peace alone, but forever and everywhere shall I live and strive for the redemption of every creature from the bonds of conditioned existence. And so great beings like bodhisattvas who live self-sacrificial lives are doing so to plant seeds. And the seeds that they are planting are seeds of wisdom, seeds of enlightenment, and that's called bodhicitta. So that idea of bodhicitta is one that is completely pertinent to today. I want to introduce you to someone who has been engaged in planting seeds of wisdom for quite a while now. His name is John Powers. He's a longtime student of Theosophy who has been, who created and has been running for many years a publishing company called Theosophy Trust. And part of what he is doing in planting these seeds of wisdom far and wide is to share them with people who are imprisoned. And he is somebody who has a great deal of insight to share, and we're looking forward to his presentation and our subsequent conversation amongst us all. John?
Oh, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Renee, and for inviting me to talk to this group. You've actually given a good portion of my talk in your comments, so I have little left to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to first share my screen with you because that's where all the images are. And does that show up on everyone's screen?
Beautifully.
Okay,
Yes.
Good. Whoops. That's too fast here. Okay, our meeting today, as Renee said, is taking up the topic of the Bodhisattva tradition, which is kind of actually my focus. And I'll talk later just briefly about the things that I've done with Theosophy Trust and the books and for the prisoners. But to begin our discussion, I'd like to recite for you a story from the Jataka Tales, which I think everyone in this group is familiar with. They're stories about the Buddha's previous lives, many times in other than human form, and of course not to be taken literally, but maybe. So each of the Jataka Tales has a certain name, and this one is called the Mahakapi Jataka. And it describes how a certain bodhisattva, who is Gautama Buddha in a previous life, was born as a great monkey who dwelled in a beautiful Himalayan forest with a large group of monkeys. And according to the story, they were occupying some trees near the bank of the sacred river Ganges. And this was a huge banyan tree that bore fruits with divine fragrance and flavor, and of course, a favorite of all these monkeys. But the great monkey, that is the Bodhisattva and his troop, took great care to see that no fruit grew or fell from the branch that stretched towards the river. But one day, one ripe fruit did fall into the river and was caught into the net of a fisherman who showed the fruit to the king of Benares, which is the modern day Varanasi, or the ancient city of Kashi. The king went to the tree with his soldiers and saw the monkeys eating the fruits, and annoyed, he ordered his archers to shoot them. Well, the frightened monkeys ran through the trees to the Bodhisattva, who calmed them down and told them not to worry. He was going to make a bamboo bridge between the tree with the fruits and another tree on the other side of the river. But somehow the bamboo shoots weren't long enough to form the bridge. So realizing this, the Bodhisattva monkey stretched himself out at the very end to complete the bridge with his body, so that his herd of monkeys could use him to climb safely over to the other side. Well, the monkeys escaped by treading on the stretched out Bodhisattva. As this story explains, the king was filled with great awe and admiration to see how the Bodhisattva endangered his own life for the safety of his herd. And the king commanded his attendants to bring the Bodhisattva down safely from the tree and treat him with the greatest respect. So if you've heard this story before, or perhaps one like it, then you've heard something in the mysterious tradition of the Bodhisattva, one, quote, whose essence, sattva, has become wisdom, bodhi. That is, an enlightened being who remains in samsara, that is, our world of conditioned existence, suffering, and illusion, and who sacrifice themselves to serve and help humanity. The picture on the screen is of Avalokiteshvara, one of the four principal bodhisattvas of Mahayana Buddhism, but there are thousands of them. Bodhisattvas are not isolated beings, somehow rare flowers in the garden of humanity and disconnected to the rest of the garden of people on earth. Each bodhisattva belongs to the same special portion of our human race, a grand fraternity which devotes its entire effort with one mind, one will, and one overriding thought to the welfare and liberation of all beings. That fraternity is known in some traditions as the Brotherhood of Bodhisattvas. It is an actual living fraternity of beings who are wholly devoted to the salvation of the human race and who appear in the world under many guises and at different epochs and times when they can more openly do their work. These beings have a long tradition. The fraternity is vast, comprised of literally galaxies of bodhisattvas that in times past was mostly secret. The work they have done was carried on without any recognition or even any desire of recognition. The members of this brotherhood don't have any need for recognition from the mass of human beings. At other times, the work of these beings has been carried on openly, and you will recognize the names of some of these beings. Besides Gautama Buddha, you certainly know about His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso. He belongs to a very long Tibetan tradition inaugurated by Tsongkhapa, the 14th century founder of the Gelugpa, or the Yellow Cap order, to which all Dalai Lamas belong. And he was the initiator of a 7th century plan to infuse the wisdom current into Western consciousness through various agents of the fraternity of bodhisattvas. This includes a very long line of Dalai Lamas and Panchen Lamas, including the 14th Dalai Lama. Tibetan tradition recognizes thousands of bodhisattvas, but there is a group of 4 bodhisattvas in particular who are regarded as the most important and whose names you've surely heard before. There's Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, Vajrapani, and Maitreya. Perhaps less well known are teachers from the Indian tradition, like Ashoka, Nagasena, Ashvaghosha, Nagarjuna, Aryaveda, Asanga, Dignaga, Vasubandhu, Buddha Ghosha, Dharmakirti, Chandrakirti, Shantideva, Shantarakshita, Padmasambhava, Atisha, Milarepa, Marpa, so on and so on. Because we Westerners have been raised believing we only live one life, we sometimes think that all of these beings just mentioned just now are long gone, and we suppose that they have died and have disappeared from the stream of human evolution. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. These beings are said to be self-consciously immortal humans who have not disappeared from the human realm, although they may not live openly in our societies. While the term bodhisattva can have a variety of meanings as it refers to various levels of spiritual attainment, the nature of the bodhisattva is reflected most archetypally in the Kuan Yin pledge, as Renee noted. According to one legend, Kuan Yin, who is often referred to as the female Buddha, was a beautiful Indian princess who forsook marriage and a royal life in a palace to live in a convent in order to become a truly enlightened human being, or a bodhisattva. By turning her back on a life of luxury and seeking out spiritual enlightenment, her life story is recognizably similar in theme to that of the historical Buddha, Prince Siddhartha Gautama. While both individuals eventually attained to enlightenment and the right to enter nirvana, the story has it that before entering nirvana, Kuan Yin heard the despairing cry of someone back on earth. And upon hearing that sad cry, she quickly returned to the earthly plane and vowed to stay there to help all those who suffer to achieve the same level of enlightenment than she had, so that they too could enter nirvana. Kuan Yin's name, Kuan Yin, literally means the one who hears the cries of the world. Kuan Yin is said to have taken this pledge: never will I seek nor receive private individual salvation. Never will I enter into final peace alone, but forever and everywhere will I live and strive for the redemption of every creature throughout the world from the bonds of conditioned existence. This noble pledge immediately reveals two things about the Bodhisattva. The pledge can only be authentically taken by a very high being, spiritually speaking, who does not use speech in the same careless fashion that we sometimes do in making claims and commitments. For the Bodhisattva commits himself or herself to a central focus of thought in action for life and for lifetimes. He or she has taken on, in making such a vow or pledge, the highest ideal conceivable to an individuated entity. And herein we find a paradox or a mystery. The Bodhisattva sets for himself an ideal which cannot ever be fully attained, and yet he/she throws his whole being into its achievement with a focus of interest, concern, and total commitment unknown to the average human being. Here's another example of the vows taken by these beings. This one is known as the Bodhisattva Ordination and was uttered by the Indian teacher Shantideva. When the Sugatas of former times committed themselves to the bodhicitta, they gradually established themselves in the practice of a bodhisattva. So I too commit myself to the bodhicitta for the welfare of all beings and will gradually establish myself in the practice of a bodhisattva. Today, my birth has become fruitful. My birth as a human being is justified. Today, I am born in the Buddha family. I am now a son of the Buddha. Now I am determined to perform those acts appropriate to my family. I will not violate the purity of this faultless, noble family. In this beautiful vow, Shantideva mentions the word bodhicitta, which Renee referred to earlier, which means, we all know, the seed of enlightenment. And in that sentence, he is committing himself to planting that seed within all beings, a seed that in the far distant future will develop into the mighty tree of the Bodhisattva. To dwell on such an exalted conception and to seek ceaselessly to embody it in daily life is doubtless the noblest endeavor conceivable that anyone can undertake. As the Voice of the Silence, dedicated by HPB, teaches, in northern Buddhist countries where the doctrine of Nirmanakayas, those bodhisattvas who renounce well-earned nirvana, or the Dharmakaya vesture, both of which shut them out forever from the world of men, in order to invisibly assist mankind and lead it finally to parinirvana, is taught every new bodhisattva or initiated great adept is called the liberator of mankind. So the bodhisattva then is much more than a human being with an exceptionally generous heart. In fact, in striving to achieve an ideal himself, the bodhisattva becomes an ideal for us, since his life of selfless dedication to the spiritual welfare of all of humanity can be reflected in our own lives. Indeed, that is because the Buddha nature is to be found in every man, even in the worst among us. No one is excluded from the Buddha nature. The spiritual current of the Bodhisattva's wise help is not simply a matter of abstract goodwill. It is a powerful current of selfless spiritual endeavor that can be reflected in the life of anyone who is devoted to the spiritual interests of others and who strives to put their resonance with that current into action in their own life. So with that in mind, and also the theme of this week, planting seeds for the future, I want to share with you some of the work I've been involved with for the past 15 years in planting seeds for the future by sending books on spiritual subjects to inmates in state prisons throughout the southeastern United States. In 2006, I started a website called Theosophy Trust in order to preserve and make available to the public the writings of Professor Raghavan Iyer from his journal Hermes. And at some point, I got the idea that probably the people who had the most time to read these essays and had the most need to read them were the inmates in prison. And it was an unusual thought for me, as I had never given the matter of the prison population in the United States a great deal of thought. But anyway, I started creating books from the roughly 175 essays in the Hermes archives and publishing them on Amazon as a way of getting them printed and then ordering copies to send to inmates. So the first problem was getting the books into the first prison, and I tried delivering a box of books to the Maryland State Correctional Institute in Jessup, Maryland. And they turned them away and gave them back to me, saying no one had requested them, and their library had strict rules about how they could acquire books. So I tried some other prisons in Maryland with no luck. I sent some letters to other prisons in the East, but same result. So I gave up for a while. And then one day, about 6 months later, I got a letter totally out of the blue from an inmate in a Texas state prison in Beeville, Texas, named Casey Myers. And that was the name of the inmate. Now, I'd never heard of this person or the prison before. In fact, I'd never had any contact with Texas prisons. But somehow or other, this fellow had come by my Theosophy Trust information. Hold on just a second. I've got to difficulty here. There. And he wanted to know, could he get some of our books for free? And I answered, yeah, yes, of course he could. So I sent him some of our books, and along with a small printed sheet that included our contact information, plus a list of books inmates could order free of charge, and no cost to them whatsoever. So some 3 weeks later, I received 3 more letters like that from the McConnell unit in Beeville requesting books. And so I sent those 3 inmates their books along with more of our book lists. And the whole project just took off from there. It went viral kind of in an analog sort of way, as all of this information was spread solely from one hand to another hand. But then some prisoners got moved to new prisons, and the story was repeated in new locations, and on and on. So to date, after 15 years of this work, I've sent out somewhere between 10,000 to 12,000 books to inmates in 133 different prison units over 10 states. And that's Texas, Florida, Ohio, California, Illinois, Mississippi, Missouri, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Georgia. So I've shared this brief personal story with you because I think it illustrates that each of us can, in our own way, in our own time and place, reflect in a small way the completely selfless spirit of the Bodhisattva by undertaking work that benefits the interests of others. I frequently think of these words from the Voice of the Silence. Be, O Lanu, like them. Give light and comfort to the toiling pilgrim, and seek out him who knows still less than thou, who in his wretched desolation sits starving for the bread of wisdom and the bread which feeds the shadow, without a teacher, hope, or consolation, and let him hear the law. Tell him, O candidate, that he who makes of pride and self-regard bondmaidens to devotion, that he who cleaving to existence still lays his patience and submission to the law as a sweet flower at the feet of Shakyatubpa becomes a Shrutapati, he who enters in the stream of nirvana in this birth. The siddhis of perfection may loom far, far away, but the first step is taken, the stream is entered, and he may gain the eyesight of the mountain eagle, the hearing of the timid doe. Tell him, O aspirant, that true devotion may bring him back the knowledge, that knowledge which was his in former births. Thank you all very much for coming today and listening to this.
It's simply magnificent. Thank you so much, John. Really an inspiration to hear. Gosh, it's hard to know where to start. It starts, just such a vast picture, such a cosmic view when you present the idea of galaxies of bodhisattvas. And then you manage to work it down into the fact that each of our own individual lives could in some small way reflect that that state of mind and heart and soul of the Bodhisattva, just in our own little ways. As I understand it, you have been sending out books of true inspiration. These aren't just like novels or something. They're really inspirational books. And so that they have a special power in terms of their effect on those who might need them. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about that a little, and maybe some of the effects that people who have received them have reported?
Yeah, we've published books on a whole variety of subjects. like on the Bhagavad Gita, Gandhi, the Hermes articles on Gandhi and the the Buddha's path to enlightenment, self-actualization, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. We published The Ocean of Theosophy because that's a public domain book and can be republished by anyone. A volume called The Dawning of Wisdom, Wisdom in Action. Those are essays that really deal with the practical aspects of the path and what to expect, and timely and frank warnings of what's ahead, what lies ahead, and always generous tips, if you will, on things that you can do, images that you can use in meditation, lines of thought that can be pursued profitably, so to speak, that are very powerful and go right to the heart of some of the problems that we as beginning neophytes will encounter, and things that we need to be prepared to overcome. We just recently published last year the Gupta Vidya, which is a 3-volume compendium of a large number of these Hermes essay that Professor Iyer rewrote in the final years of his life, and ordered them, edited them, some of them slightly, and then put them together in book format. And we were truly blessed to receive those manuscripts to publish, which we have done in hardback and softback edition from Amazon. So those are the kinds of things that we've been publishing. Now, let me just give you an example of a letter. I did pull this one up ahead of time because I thought someone might ask to see something like this. So this was a letter from a fellow named John Grimes. I got a lot of letters from him. And this was his introductory letter. This is what he wrote to me the first time he contacted me. He says, "I'm very interested in the deeper spiritual knowledge and understanding. I have consciously choose to seek and find the truth that sets us free," kind of referencing his familiarity with the biblical passages. "As a prisoner, freedom means a lot. Spiritual, emotional, and physical freedom is very important to me. I let my love for the divine spirit and my intuition guide me. I find myself in a prison behind bars, but I also know that the people are in a prison without bars. I always could sense it," I think meaning S-E-N-S-E, sense it. "This prison that is hidden by most people, I could always feel it. So many things in life seem fake to me, especially religion and law. I know inside that the truth is the solution, the truth of who God is and who I really am." And then again, he goes on to say, "There's a book called The Secret Doctrine by Madam B. I would like to read that book. I heard she went on a quest for truth. Sounds interesting." Yes, it is. "Yet I am open-minded, and I will accept anything that comes my way for whatever value it is worth. I promise it will be read and well appreciated. Thank you for what you do for true truth seekers. I am blessed to have come across this address. Good books are hard to find, so thanks again," etc. And then he goes on to talk about just his address and some other matters. So I get a lot of these letters. Anyone who wants to read them, there's some of them, a selection. You could go on the Theosophy Trust website and find the link to the Books for Prisoners Project page, and there's a link in there for these letters. I have a bunch of them in PDF format. But what I found is these books are like a lifeline for these prisoners, because it's a very it's a violent, many times animalistic environment, and very difficult for many people to survive in that environment. And in addition, they have been, well, there are a large number of inmates who have a very low educational level. And a lot of them are in for very long periods of time. They're not just, low-level drug dealers. They are been convicted of, really horrendous things. Texas and Florida incarcerates more people than any other states in the Union. So that naturally, that's where most of my requests come from. But they appreciate these books literally like someone threw them a lifesaver. They'd been drowning, and it gave them these noble ideals, faith in themselves, because that's probably the worst effect of prison, is one's identity, whatever it was, becomes, so to speak, somewhat shattered. And to hear the teaching that they share the Buddha nature, that they have the capacity to emulate the bodhisattvas no matter what they've done, no matter what crimes they may have been convicted of, there's still hope for them. And light, love, and hope is what these books bring them.
Thank you so much, John, for that wonderful, wonderful presentation. I don't have this thought completely structured, but we live in a culture that's kind of a show me kind of culture. Mm-hmm. So the idea of a bodhisattva tradition is like, well, I don't see any bodhisattvas anywhere. So where's this tradition? But I'm thinking of Desmond Tutu just passed, I believe yesterday, and he seems to be someone that resonated to the whole bodhisattvic ideal. I was wondering, like, when you started your effort to share these wonderful spiritual books with prisoners, it seemed like you came across a lot of obstacles, and actually, in a sense, just kind of realized, well, maybe this isn't going to work out. And then you moved on from that effort. And when you were just focused on other things, then all of a sudden a door opened to you out of the blue. And I was thinking of that line that if we take one step in their direction, they will take one step in ours. Is there a sense in which, for us to really begin to be able to become aware of this class of human beings, that we need to make the first effort? Somehow we need to have a sincere effort to perhaps benefit mankind ourselves, and then all of a sudden they will help us in that endeavor somehow in inextricable ways.
Trying to begin a certain line of spiritual action involves a couple of things. One is what Mr. Judge says of students of theosophy. He says that we have to become a center of spiritual force, and lines of force will radiate outward from that center, which will have a beneficial effect on other people. And it also reminds me of a statement by Goethe. He says, and this is on taking the initiative. He says, whatever you can or believe you can do, begin it. For boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. So there's something about taking the initiative that is also reflecting what the bodhisattvas do. They continually take the initiative. They're continually undertaking initiatives to help the human race. So even in some little way, when we take the initiative to start some current of thought, of spiritual endeavor, and we bind ourselves with a vow, as the bodhisattvas do, it doesn't have to be, the Kuan Yin pledge, which we're really not in a position to take. at that level, but we can still take a vow that approaches it or reflects it in some way, in some small way. And as Goethe said, such things have genius, power, and magic in it.
So are you suggesting that in a way, like this, like John can't send out a book to somebody he doesn't know is out there to receive it. So, I mean, just on the physical plane, they need to write to him, say, here I am receptive. Please send me a book, in order to even start the process. And so they're putting themselves in a place of receptivity. And that's what, I mean, first he's ready. He sends out the word, but until somebody identifies themselves as a receiver, they cannot be a receiver.
Yeah, I think it's receptivity all around. John is trying to send out a message that he has these books available. Somehow that person in prison picked up on that wavelength, I think. But then John, somehow he had a path of how to do it, and that path didn't work out. But then another path opened up to him and he was receptive to it. So this idea of receptivity, we have to be, like we've talked about in your GEMS sessions a number of times, this deep listening idea. We have to have that sensitivity and receptivity because the path is obscure, both the path to wisdom as well as the path of service. Those are the thoughts that I have about that.
Yeah, and it also takes, one thing I've noticed, it also takes the ability to recognize opportunities. So, one has to be intuitively alert to opportunities. So that's another thing that helps a lot. I think Carolyn has a question, Renee.
Please.
Yeah, going back to the first question, which is the one I had too, about have you heard back from the recipients of these books? Because it's one thing to say, oh, a free book, and then find the ocean of theosophy very daunting and all. But have they asked you in these letters about specifics like karma and reincarnation, both of which are not only new ideas, important ideas, but may help them think out why they're in the situation they're in and what they're going to do about it, et cetera, et cetera. So do you find that they, because, Crosby and Judge say theosophy is for those who want it. We're not missionaries. Somehow somebody has to be curious. So have you found them really wanting to get into some of the specifics of what are new ideas to them and might be very helpful in understanding the situation they're in?
Good question, Carolyn. And the answer is yes, quite a few. Not all. I mean, sometimes, these books go out to someone and you never hear anything more from them. But more frequently than not, I get a lot of follow-on letters about the books that were sent and requesting additional books. And sometimes these fellows will request, 9, 12, 15 books till they kind of work their way up to the secret doctrine, which is sort of the prize that, that they're working towards. But let me just read you a portion of a letter. I just pulled some out because I thought there might be some questions about this. But he says, thank you for the amazing books by R.N. Iyer. The spirit, the texture, if you will, of Professor Iyer's essays are of a non-coddling parent. They demand a type of personal responsibility that reaches beyond the self-deception of what psychologists call substitute gratification, in which we seek union in ways that prevent it, and into the actual of action. And then he says, he quotes this psychologist, and he says, "I'm grateful because the allure of conceptual elaboration has kept me enthralled for a number of years in coming to realize that no amount of mental gymnastics, no knowledge in and of itself, can touch my internal conflict. This realization has led to its own conflict, in which I've recognized the vital necessity of daily dealing with my actual energies in practical knowledge that does not lead one toward application in a way that is illusory or leading to a blind, if not the blind." That last one's a little difficult. So yeah, a lot of these guys wake up when they've been held accountable, and that's fortunate for them.
You told me once you gave them tests.
I do.
You
Being a
used to say
teacher, I can't resist, Robert.
you
Being an
gave them
ex-teacher.
questions, they had to answer these questions before they could get another book. Or
Yeah,
do you
exactly.
still do any of that?
Yeah. So I try to get them to make sure they've read The Key to Theosophy, The Ocean, a couple of the books of like The Dawning of Wisdom, Wisdom in Action, so that they can have a basic, and The Voice of the Silence, and they have a basic grounding in theosophical thinking and the philosophy. And then I let them know that, because they all want, the secret doctrine or ISIS. And so I say, okay, well, once you've read this sort of course of books, if you are still interested in the secret doctrine or ISIS, I want you to answer 3 questions in a short 2-3-page essay. What is theosophy? What are its main tenets? That is, and only 3. I only want to hear 3 tenets. And what are the 3 things that you would most want to explain to a fellow inmate or someone else who inquires about theosophy? What would you tell them? How would you explain it to them? So I get these essays back, and most of them are quite good. Some of them are quite profound. It's amazing how deeply they penetrate to the heart of the philosophy. And it's, I think some of it is due to the influence of The Voice of the Silence, where they read about spiritual, about head learning and soul wisdom, and how it's not just book knowledge, but rather knowledge that arises spontaneously from within, as Krishna says. And they frequently quote that to me, how they never realized that that's the source of real spiritual knowledge, and that spiritual progress can't be gauged by one's ability to talk about these things, but rather has to do with the sense of separateness falling away, and they're sensing more and more their fellowship, their brotherhood, their identity with other people. And it's quite remarkable reading some of these letters. But these are the people who say those kinds of things are more the exception than the rule, because they generally have a higher level of education, and a lot of the inmates don't. As I said, they have rather limited education. I think that's part of the reason why they're in prison. Their educational achievements were just shortened. But the other thing is, even if you don't know, you're still planting seeds for the future.
A question that I have been working on for many years and wonder if you have any insight on it from the interchanges you've had with the prisoners. I find it very difficult to help people find a way out of a victim mentality. And I can only imagine that in prisons, there would be a great sense of victim mentality that pervades amongst many of them. And I wonder whether you have, and I know all you have to go on is the written, written conversations back and forth that you have with letters. Have you felt that people have been able to break through that sense of being a victim to being an agent that actually has, that takes responsibility for where they stand right now and where they're going in the future?
Certainly, Renee. One encounters people who still do have a sense of victimhood, that they didn't really do what they were accused of, or they're here and they shouldn't be here. But that's kind of more rare, because I think those who are asking for books, and especially those who come back with follow-on letters after receiving books, are people who have initially made a commitment to themselves to accept responsibility for their own lives. And this, asking for the books and trying to find a way out of the morass that they've created out of their lives is, it's founded upon some sense of personal responsibility. I've had several prisoners tell me they've come to the realization that they had to go to prison in order to find these teachings, that they probably would have never found them if they hadn't gone to prison. So, every cloud has a silver lining.
Do you have a sense of what it was, though, that catalyzed that change from feeling like a victim to taking responsibility?
No, I can't. I mean, I don't have enough details of their daily lives and their interactions. And some of these fellows form little study groups. They pass books back and forth. They have a lot of conversations. I used to get requests from prisoners to build with an inmate. It took me a long time to figure out what they were talking about. They wanted me to build with them. And I think that means it's some prison talk about, like, get real, have a real close heart-to-heart, truthful, no-holds-barred conversation where you can grow a solid relationship. I think that's what it means. But as this fellow Lanny Kilgore wrote to me about, his readings in Professor Ayer's essays, he says, he strikes me as a non-coddling parent, demanding a type of personal responsibility that reaches beyond self-deception. And that's quite a realization to come to, even for someone who's not in prison. And we have to remember, these people are just a cross-section of society that, they've been in prison for crimes committed, but they're essentially no different, really, than the rest of the people on the outside. And you also have to ask the same question of people who are outside who, may be resistant to spiritual truths. Maybe they're, longstanding materialists, or maybe they have an allegiance to a certain scripture, like, either Jewish or Christian scriptures or Muslim or whatever it is. So they may be resistant to this idea of individual responsibility. I mean, the idea of an individual treading the path, actually, I don't think really came out into the culture, Western culture, until probably after Pico della Mirandola and the Renaissance. This idea of choice, of the power of manas, of thinking, of choosing, of man is the measure of all things, became sort of a modus of thought. And so it isn't until a person really sort of begins to follow out that line of thinking that the idea of personal responsibility makes sense. Because otherwise people are left with a sense of group identity. And that group, we know nowadays, those groups can be small and larger, and they can be founded on any number of things: personal resentments, anger, political views, religious views, just cultural war views. So becoming an individual, individuating, is sort of a necessary precondition for accepting responsibility. And this wonderful volume we published called Self-Actualization and Spiritual Self-Regeneration has a lot of wonderful articles, and we try to send that book to prisoners who look like they could really benefit from it. So one of the things is you have to sort of use your intuition to get a sense of what this person might benefit from reading. And, sort of, it's not a course. It's not like, oh, this is a course in theosophy, though a lot of them think it is. But, well, maybe because it has a test at the end.
Really
It's
helpful.
interesting to me that from this fellow that you were just talking about, and Dr. Iyer's non-coddling sense of personal responsibilities, really a cultural kind of indictment that so many human beings don't have a very real sense of human potential or confidence in themselves. Mm-hmm. That as an individual, they could achieve just a minimum respect for themselves and for others. It seems like in saying that he doesn't do this, you're led to think that the culture does have a coddling sense of being a parent and you don't measure up. Or you recognize somehow deep inside that it's missing the mark somehow.
I agree 100% with what you said, Donna. Really excellent observations.
Coddling parent or just a punishing parent. And, in either case doesn't impart that sense of the magnificence of their human potential.
Yeah.
Either direction. Yeah. Well, I'm seeing we're at the top of the hour. Would somebody like to give John a vote of thanks for his presentation and comments today?
I'll thank John. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Robert. Short and sweet.
Thanks here too, John.
Thank you, Donna.
We can thank you for the presentation today, but also, your own efforts in the building a center of the spread of theosophy in multiple ways. And
Thank you for your explanation. It's always good to hear a good summary of the Bodhisattva ideal. That
Yeah.
was,
in some little way in which it could be embodied, find a means of expression, which is, that's our task then. Remind us of our task to find some way to embody the Bodhisattva ideal. So thank you.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Mr. Judge says. He says, find your own, area of influence, so to speak, your sphere, where you can, embody these ideals and bring them alive. Doesn't matter what it is or how small or large, but it's got to be your own authentic sphere of influence.
I want to also thank you for letting us know some of the different sources of the writings that you publish. You mentioned Patanjali from the yoga tradition. You mentioned texts from the Buddhist tradition. And I know that some of the things that you have published actually come from a number of the great religions, philosophies of the world. So that breadth, and when you mention these galaxies of bodhisattvas, beings who walk the earth, we know that they can come from any tradition whatsoever. They share that same golden heart. So thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for being here.